Hey, it's Mr. Allred, and we've been factoring. So today we're going to work on factoring quadratics. Quadratics are expressions that have an x squared or some variable squared, and that's the highest power. The template there is ax squared plus bx plus c. That could be about anything here. So just to kind of give you an example, I believe the one we're going to do in a moment is 3x squared plus 21x plus 18. So if we think about the ax squared plus bx plus c, in that example, a would be 3, b would be 21, and c would be 18. This is a hard topic. A lot of people learn to factor quadratics in different ways, and some of those ways are not taught thoroughly. So a lot of people are able to do certain problems, but do not do a good job when it comes to different types of problems, as we'll see. So I've got a list of rules here that will get us through quadratics. It's rather long, or the list is rather long. The process is not very difficult. But try and keep this close by so you can look at it and compare, because I'll kind of write it out, but you'll want to be able to reference these steps as you go through. So I'll talk about them briefly here, and then we'll do a couple of examples. The first one, you've got this quadratic. So if you can pull out any common terms, do so first. So we talked about common terms already. So if there's a common number that can be pulled out of all three terms, or even a variable, sometimes you might not start with a quadratic, but you can pull a variable out and then it turns into a quadratic. Do that first. Okay, so if you do pull something out in the beginning, you're going to keep that until the end, and you will put it back with whatever terms you end up with. I also like to put in here that if the a term is negative, it is helpful to pull a negative out. That's not mandatory, but every single time I run into it, that's how I handle. Okay, so up here in the example I've got, my a is 3. So that's not negative, so I wouldn't pull that out. But if I did look at it, 3, 21, and 8 are all divisible by 3. So in step 1, I'd be pulling out a 3. Okay, so after doing that, we're going to look at our quadratic again. And you may not be able to pull anything out in step 1. But when we look at our quadratic in step 2, we're going to set up two equations and find two numbers. So I have it here that you're going to look for two numbers that multiply together to give you the a times c term. Okay, so whatever a and c are, you'd multiply those together and put it on the right hand side there. And also the same two numbers have to add up to be b, or that middle value. Okay, so we're going to take those two numbers. That's the basically the hardest part of this, because this is the only place you really have to come up with anything on your own. Step 3, we're going to take those two numbers and we're going to set up two simple expressions. Ax plus the first number times ax plus the second number. And that a comes from our quadratic up there. So we're going to set those up. And if a was not 1, at this point, step 4, you'll see if you can pull a common factor out of either one of these terms. And if you can, you're going to throw it away. Now, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail when we do an example. And then step 5, if we pulled out anything in step 1, we're going to put it back with our factors at the end, and then we will be done. Okay, I know that's a lot to absorb at one time, but I'm going to walk through it with a good example here, and then we'll do several examples. Okay. So here is the first example, and it was the one I had. 3x squared plus 21x plus 18. So my first step would be to factor anything out I could. And in this case, I can pull out a 3. And that will leave me x squared plus 7x plus 6. Okay. Now from that, I'm going to look at the equation kind of newly, because I'm really trying to factor the quadratic in here. So in here, the a will be 1, and I'm going to put that in here since it's not there. The b will be 7, and the c will be 6. Okay. So that 3 out in front is going to be there in the very end when we're done. But for now, we're just trying to factor the other part. So in step 2, we're going to look for two numbers that multiply to give us a times c. Okay, so two numbers that multiply together give us 6 and add up to be the number in the middle, which is 7. So let me see, that was a times c and the 7 was the b. So it doesn't take much work to figure this out. The two numbers that you want are 1 and 6. They won't always be the two numbers that you write down there in A and C. But then we're going to come back and in step 3, we're going to write 1x plus 1. That's the first number. Okay. And then that'll be times 1x plus 6, and that's the second number. Okay. Now in step 4, we said if the a was not 1, we would pull something out and throw it away. Well, there's nothing to throw out here, but we would just go ahead and write down what we got, and we'll leave the 1 out. So we got x plus 1 times x plus 6. So in step 5, we had this 3 way up top here that we pulled out to begin with. We're going to put that back there if you haven't carried it through. So when we factor 3x squared plus 21x plus 18, we'll get 3 times x plus 1 times x plus 6. And that's our answer. Okay. Now, step 4 here didn't really show much work, and make sure that we do get a chance to talk about those a little bit later on. I don't know if that'll be the next problem I do or not. Yeah, let me jump to one where we do use step 4, and then we can just kind of move it around. Alright, so here we are, and we're going to do another example. We've got 5x squared minus 13x minus 6. So in step 1, we'd pull out anything we can. There's no variables there we can pull out. X squared, x, the last one does not have an x, and 5, 13, and 6 do not have any common factors. So there's nothing to do in step 1. I did write it down just because I want you to get used to that. So a will be 5, b will be negative 13. So if there's a sign with the number, make sure we keep it, and c will be negative 6. So here we need two numbers that multiply together. They give us a times c, which will be negative 30. Those two numbers also have to add up to be b, which is negative 13. So keep in mind what we got here. We got two numbers that multiply together to give us a negative. So that means the two numbers must be different signs. One of them would be positive and negative for that to happen. And they add up to give us a negative, so the bigger number has to be negative. Now it's quite easy to look at this and think that you're going to use 3 and 13, but actually if you multiply 3 and 13, you don't get 30. Excuse me, 10 and 3 is what I was thinking, but that's not going to work. What you want here, I believe, is negative 15 and 2. Okay, so use those two numbers, and hold on just a second. I'm sorry, so we look at this, and negative 15 times 2 will give me negative 30. Negative 15 plus 2 will give me negative 13. So be very careful, because it may look like you want a certain set of numbers like 3 and 10, but if you put them together, it doesn't give you what you want if you check the signs behind yourself. So be careful. So let's see here. Step 3. Oops. Lost my marker. Here we go. Step 3. We're going to write our ax and the two numbers. So 5x minus 15 times 5x plus 2. And if you have much experience with factoring, what you should notice here is that if you multiply these two first terms together, 5x times 5x, you get 25x squared, which is way too much. So the simple explanation here is that the method we're using, we put too much in. We put an extra 5. We just put that 5 in, in both places, and we're going to kind of use the next step to correct. So step 4, I said if you can factor anything out of either one of these, you will do that. So in the first one, the 5x minus 15, you can pull a 5 out, and that will give you x minus 3. In the second one, 5x plus 2, you can't pull anything out. Okay. And I also said that if you pull anything out in step 4, throw it away. Okay. Just mark it out. Okay. We put too much in step 3 if there's a value for a other than 1. And in step 4, we'll correct that by pulling it out. Now this is different than if we pulled it out in step 1. So then step 5 here, we will have x minus 3 times 5x plus 2. And if you're questioning that, you can fold this back together and see it does give us the 5x squared minus 13x minus 6. Okay. Just stick to the method and be careful in step 2 and make sure you're paying attention in steps 3 and 4 and you'll be fine. Okay. More examples coming in the next video.